Every old hall collects stories, some gilded, some grim, and here at Calverley, centuries of family pride became shattered in one night, in what became known as one of Yorkshire's darkest tales. Welcome to Calverley Old Hall, a beautiful medieval manor house nestled in the village of Calverley, West Yorkshire. It's a remarkably beautiful building, one that combines layers of medieval and Tudor bone, stitched together by centuries of lives. Quite the contrast to the stone walls of York Castle, where a man from this house met a punishment so medieval it feels like a fable. Today we stand in the midst of these places, between a domestic crime and a prison cell, to tell of a night when a father's rage unmade a house. Today we are in the village of Calverley, West Yorkshire, which is in between the cities of Leeds and Bradford. Now we're very lucky to be here today because it is one of the Heritage Open Days and this place has lots of incredible history. However, we're here to look at that, but we're also here to look at one of the darkest events that played out in Yorkshire's history, and it played out right here in the old hall behind me. So if you're new to the channel, my name's Claire, this is The Wanderless Way. Thank you to everybody that supports the channel by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, becoming members, sending super thanks. Honestly, everything you do helps this channel to grow and it allows me to carry on with adventures like this and share the stories that I find with you. Okay, so if you're ready to dive into the stories of Calverley Old Hall, then pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, and that's enough waffle, let's wander. Today the stone looks calm, the windows almost drowsy with age, but every old house collects weather and some collect storms. The Calverleys were here long before Shakespeare inked a page. Knights and squires, a manor threaded with duty and pride. The complex you see now grew over centuries, solar and hall, chapel and wings, each generation adding its chapter. At the turn of the 17th century, the pen passed to Walter Calverley. He had the birthright, but not the ballast. Inheritance came early, debts came sooner. He gambled, he drank, he spent. He married Philippa Brooke, a match made to stabilise a wobbling future. And for a while the dowry held back the tide. But the tide has patience. Land was mortgaged, creditors circled, shame fed jealousy, and jealousy soured into suspicion. You can feel it when a house tightens. Doors close a little harder, silence settles in corners, meals turn perfunctory. That spring of 1605, any calm that remained finally snapped. For this part of the story, I bring you to the 23rd of April 1605, St George's Day. The parish is in leaf, birdsong in the air, but inside the old hall, the air is beginning to sour. Wine, anger, and a simmering pot that's breaking to the boil. The accounts agree on the essentials and diverge on the atmosphere, but the facts are as hard as oak. The pamphleteers would later publish that on the 23rd of April 1605, Walter, in a frenzy, half drunk with jealous suspicion, wholly drunk with rage, seized a dagger. He turned first upon his little boys, William just a tot, and Walter Jr., scarcely past a cradle's lullaby. 2 thrusts, and 2 small bodies fallen. He then turned to Philippa, his wife, striking her too with the blade. Here the story keeps a shard of grace. Some call it a miracle, others sheer luck. But whatever happened, Philippa's corset, with its boning, acted as a hidden cage beneath her gown, and it caught the blade. Flesh cut, blood spilled from her, but she was saved. Philippa fell, and Walter believed her to be dead. The house erupted into panic, a servant was attacked in the scramble, and finally the door burst to the yard with Walter mounting his horse to ride out. One last thought on his mind was his infant Henry. Thankfully, Henry was away with his nurse, but Walter rode out to find him, to finish what he had begun. But Yorkshire's lanes have their own justice. The horse stumbled, Walter was thrown and taken, hauled before authority, and sent to York. York is about 30 miles from here, which doesn't sound very far, but it is when you've got blood on your hands and you're under guard arrest. And that is where Calverley went. But when he got there, he maintained his silence. In York Castle, Walter made a decision he would not take back. He refused to plead. Under the law, he knew his silence would shut the door on a trial, yet it swung open another. Peine forte et dure, pressing beneath weight until a prisoner either speaks or is crushed. Why choose that, you might ask? Well, the truth is, if he never entered a plea, there would be no conviction, and the estate could pass to the living child he had failed to reach, Henry. A father's last calculation, if not his last kindness. On the 5th of August 1605, the weights were set one by one. Ribs do not argue with iron. In the last thin space between breath and silence, tradition gives him a final line in dialect. A pund or more weight, lig on, lig on. A strange bravery, a stranger defiance. It ended as it had to. He died pressed, a relic punishment in a very graphic way. Not unlike today's media, the story soon gripped the crowds. A pamphlet appeared, its title blunt and sensational. 2 most unnatural and bloody murders. It laid out the facts for a horrified public, and like so many crime sheets of the day, it sold quickly. What's interesting about this crime is that not long after the story reached the London stage, a short play titled A Yorkshire Tragedy was printed in 1608 with Shakespeare's name on the page. Today scholars attribute it instead to Thomas Middleton, but audiences at the time didn't care whose hand held the quill. They cared about the ghastly context. This was no tale of kings or battles, it was the horror of a family home turned crime scene, a tragedy that could unfold in any household, anywhere. History loves to chase the villain, but I want to stand for the ones who had to live with the aftermath. Philippa, she survived her wounds. She gave her testimony, she remarried, and she died years later of natural causes. That's the public record. The private life, the mornings after the empty children's beds, well, they never made a pamphlet. Henry, the infant spared by distance, inherited when the law allowed. The estate did what estates do. It shifted, it splintered, it found new arrangements. The old hall moved through time, sometimes grand, sometimes fallen to cottages, sometimes at risk, sometimes redeemed. People repaired windows, raised families argued over leases. Meanwhile, the April night refused to be forgotten. We won't talk about ghosts inside the hall because, to be quite honest with you, since this event there have been lots of people that have called the place home, lots of happy memories made, and I did actually meet a chap who had rented the place for his birthday, and he said there was nothing untoward, nothing scary went on. However, there have been rumours because it's made its way into many ghost books like this one. The most common tale is of Walter himself, seen drifting along the lane between hall and church, a blood-stained dagger in hand. Sometimes he's on foot, sometimes on horseback, even on a great black steed said to have no head. Gosh knows where that came from. In the 19th century, villagers claimed the church bell tolled by itself at 1 o'clock in the morning, only to fall silent the moment a key turned in the lock. And then there's a story that belongs not to scholars or magistrates, but to children. Local boys who dared each other to summon old Calverley's ghost right here in the churchyard. So I'm going to read a little extract from this book, Ghosts and Spirits, the encyclopedia. This story is all about, obviously, the Calverley murders. So it says, on the 5th of January 1884, Calverley church bell rang at 1 o'clock in the morning, but ceased as soon as the villagers put the key in the door to investigate the noise. No investigation was in fact undertaken, possibly due to fear, but Walter Calverley's ghost was unanimously elected the chief suspect. Shortly after this, some local boys conducted a séance to see if they could raise Calverley's ghost. They frightened themselves sufficiently to end up running away in all directions, having seen a mysterious something. Since that time, there have been no further reports. That story and similar ones with their mix of daring, terror and tragedy have been printed in several collections of haunted folklore ever since. Whether it was imagination, hysteria or something older stirring in the dark, the memory of this tragedy stayed alive. If you have heard of any of the ghost stories from this place, feel free to share them in the comments. Today the house stands as both a survivor and a storybook because this place has seen splendour, ruin and finally rebirth. The Landmark Trust took on Calverley Old Hall back in 1981, when parts of it were sliding towards dereliction. For years, a small section served as holiday accommodation. The rest, the medieval solar, the Tudor wings, the chapel, well, they stood in danger of being lost forever. That changed with a vast restoration that was launched in 2021. Over 2 years and with the help of a £5 million campaign, including a significant lottery grant, the house was lifted from the Heritage at Risk register and made whole again. Conservation here did not mean scrubbing the past away. Instead, every layer was honoured. Medieval timbers revealed, Tudor beams shored up, while modern touches like underfloor heating, a sweeping staircase, accessible design were folded carefully into the story. And sometimes the house gave back more than anyone expected. Behind plaster that had lain untouched for centuries, conservators uncovered a Tudor-painted chamber, walls alive with picturesque scrolls and colours that had not seen daylight in 500 years. The discovery was hailed as the find of a lifetime, as though the hall itself wanted to remind us it had beauty as well as blood in its history. So today Calverley is more than a relic. It's a place you can still walk, still stay, still feel history pressing close. A great hall under its hammer beam roof, a chapel touched with centuries of prayer, and painted walls that once dazzled and now dazzle again. It stands as proof that a house does not have to be trapped in its darkest night. It can be remembered for tragedy, yes, but also for resilience, renewal, and the voices of the living who continue to give it purpose. Today, in the care of the Landmark Trust, it's a place where you can holiday, where you can sleep in its comforting surroundings among centuries of history. When we look at old houses, it's easy to admire the beams and the windows, to imagine grand dinners in the great hall or fires crackling in the hearth. But every house has known moments we can't see from the street. Some stories shine, others sit like shadows, and sometimes both live in the same walls. Calverley Old Hall reminds us of that. Behind its stone and timber was once a night of rage that took 2 children's lives and left a wife bloodied but alive. Philippa carried scars visible and hidden. William and Walter were laid to rest far too young, and little Henry, spared by distance that night, grew up with the weight of a legacy he had not chosen. These are the people we remember when we walk here, not only the man who committed the crime, but those who suffered it and those who lived with its aftermath. And perhaps that's the lesson. Every house, every street we pass today carries lives we will never fully know. Joy, sorrow, secrets and love. They've all played out behind closed doors. Calverley's story is extreme, even infamous, but in a quieter way, it's not so very different from any home that has held generations of human hearts. So what do you think? Do houses hold memories, or is it simply us that are bringing the shadows inside it when we walk within its walls? I would have really loved to have shown you the graves of those wee boys today in the churchyard, but unfortunately the older part of the cemetery is actually blocked off. You can't get into it because it's dangerous now, so we will just have to pay our respects to them in our minds. Now, thank you to everybody that's watched this video. Let me know in the comments, have you heard this story before? Have you visited Calverley Old Hall, and would you stay there if you got the opportunity? Thank you also to Heritage Open Days and the Landmark Trust that keep these buildings preserved for future generations. So I've been Claire, this has been The Wanderlust Way. You've been amazing, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.